r/ProRevenge parents always destroyed my phone so I ruined their barbecue party. Parents always destroyed my phone so I ruined their barbecue party. The sound of my brand new iPhone hitting the concrete still echoes in my nightmares. $350 of my own hard-earned money from working doubles at the local diner, shattered into 1,000 pieces right there on our pristine driveway while my friends watched in horror. Maybe next time you'll remember what 10 p.m. means, my father said, brushing glass fragments off his hands like he'd just taken out the trash instead of destroying something I'd saved for 3 months to buy. I was 17 and exactly 12 minutes late. 12 minutes. My friends Sarah and Jake stood frozen by Jake's car, their faces a mixture of shock and secondhand embarrassment. This wasn't the first time they'd witnessed one of my parents' lessons, but it never got less mortifying. My mom stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, nodding approvingly at the carnage. "Don't just stand there picking up the pieces," she snapped. "You're the one who chose to be irresponsible." That was 4 months ago, and it was the 5th phone they destroyed in 2 years. Not damaged, completely obliterated. The first time, I'd accidentally left it on silent during a family dinner. The second was because I texted back a friend who asked about homework while we were watching a movie. The third time, I dared to check the time during one of my dad's lectures about respect and responsibility. The fourth had committed the unforgivable sin of buzzing with a notification during my little sister's piano recital. Each time, they'd made sure I understood it was my fault. Each time, I'd had to start over, saving every tip and overtime hour just to have basic communication with the outside world. And each time, they'd found a new reason why I deserved it. The worst part wasn't even the money, though working at Mickey's Diner for $8.50 an hour plus tips made every dollar precious. It was the humiliation. My parents had perfected the art of destroying my phones at the worst possible moments, usually when friends were around or when I needed them most. It was like they got some twisted satisfaction from watching me scramble to explain to my boss why I couldn't be reached, or seeing me borrow other people's phones to coordinate group projects. But they never touched my sister Emma's phone. 15-year-old Emma, who regularly stayed out past midnight and talked back constantly, somehow never faced the concrete judgment that mine did. Her phone was sacred, untouchable, probably because she was their baby, and could do no wrong in their eyes. The double standard was suffocating, but what really killed me was how they'd lecture me about earning respect and learning consequences right after writing a check for Emma's cheerleading camp or buying her the latest trendy clothes. Everything I wanted, I had to work for. Everything she wanted appeared like magic. My parents were obsessed with appearances, specifically, appearing to be the perfect suburban family. Our house was immaculate, our lawn was magazine-worthy, and every family photo was professionally staged. They threw elaborate parties constantly, always trying to one-up the neighbors and impress their social circle. Dad's work colleagues, mom's book club, the country club crowd, anyone whose opinion might elevate their status got the full dog and pony show. But behind closed doors, I was their favorite target for character-building exercises that looked a lot more like power trips to me. Standing there that night 4 months ago, watching my friends drive away while I swept up the remains of my phone, something inside me finally snapped. The worst part about not having a phone wasn't the inconvenience, it was the isolation. While my classmates made weekend plans through group chats, I was left completely out of the loop. My manager at Mickey's had to call the house phone when schedules changed, which meant dealing with my mom's passive-aggressive questions about why I was getting so many work calls. "Maybe if you were more responsible with your personal property, people could reach you directly," she'd say, her voice dripping with false concern whenever she had to take a message for me. I lasted 3 weeks before caving and buying another phone, the cheap Android this time, thinking maybe if it looked less expensive, they'd be less likely to destroy it. I was wrong. 2 weeks later, Dad found it while doing one of his random room inspections, something that definitely didn't happen to Emma, and declared that since I bought it, in secret, without asking permission, it was clearly being used for inappropriate activities. That one went through the garbage disposal. The sound still makes me sick. After that, I gave up for a while. What was the point? I was throwing away weeks of work just to have basic communication, only to watch it get destroyed over increasingly ridiculous infractions. Instead, I started hoarding my money, building a secret escape fund in a bank account they didn't know about. Every tip, every overtime shift, every dollar I could scrape together went into that account. But the isolation was wearing on me. My grades started slipping because I couldn't coordinate with study groups. I missed shifts at work because I never got the messages about schedule changes. My social life basically evaporated. It's amazing how quickly you become irrelevant to your peers when they can't reach you. The breaking point came during junior prom season. I'd been saving up for months, not just for a dress and shoes, but for the whole experience. Sarah and our friend group had been planning for weeks, and I was finally feeling like I might be included in something normal for once. I borrowed Sarah's phone to check the group chat about our dinner reservations, and that's when I saw it, dozens of messages I'd missed over the past month. Plan changes, inside jokes, bonding moments, all happening without me. They'd stopped including me in the initial planning because I was never available to respond. I wasn't being excluded out of malice, I was just becoming irrelevant by default. That night, I broke down and begged my parents for permission to buy another phone. I promised I'd follow every rule, accept every restriction, install any monitoring app they wanted. I just needed to be connected. My dad looked at me with what I can only describe as satisfaction. "You should have thought about that before you proved you couldn't handle the responsibility," he said. "Maybe next year, if you can show us you've matured." Next year. I'd be 18 next year, legally an adult, and he was talking about maybe letting me have a phone. That's when it hit me just how much control they needed to have over every aspect of my life. This wasn't about teaching me responsibility or consequences. This was about keeping me completely dependent on them, isolated from any support system that might help me realize how messed up the situation really was. I ended up missing prom. Not because I couldn't afford it, but because I couldn't coordinate anything without a phone, and borrowing other people's devices constantly was humiliating. I spent that Saturday night working a double shift at Mickey's, serving happy families their weekend dinner while my classmates danced and made memories I'd never have. But I wasn't just serving tables that night. I was planning. My parents' obsession with their social image reached new heights that summer. Dad got promoted to regional manager at his firm, and suddenly our house became party central. Every other weekend, there was some elaborate gathering, wine tastings for Mom's book club, poker nights for Dad's colleagues, neighborhood barbecues that looked like they belonged in a lifestyle magazine. I became their invisible servant during these events. While Emma got to socialize and play the role of the charming younger daughter, I was expected to bus tables, refill drinks, and clean up afterward. All while maintaining the perfect smile and pretending our family was as harmonious as it appeared. "Could you grab more ice from the garage freezer?" Mom would whisper through gritted teeth, her public voice still engaged with Mrs. Henderson from down the street. "And for God's sake, try to look happy. This isn't a funeral." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, helping them maintain their precious reputation while they systematically isolated me from my own peers. But every party was a learning experience. I watched how much my parents valued these people's opinions, how carefully they curated every detail, how devastated Mom got when attendance was lower than expected. Their social standing meant everything to them. More than Emma's happiness, more than my well-being, more than anything else in their lives. That's when the plan started forming. The opportunity came in late July when Dad announced his biggest party yet, a celebration of his promotion complete with catering from the fancy Italian place downtown, professional bartenders, and a guest list of 60 people. Everyone who mattered in their social circle would be there, his entire office, Mom's various groups, the neighbors they were always trying to impress, even some relatives flying in from out of state. "This is going to be perfect," Mom gushed, showing me the Pinterest board she created. The Hendersons threw that lovely anniversary party last month, and the Johnsons had that graduation celebration for their son. It's our turn to show everyone how it's really done. She'd been planning for 3 weeks, obsessing over every detail. The yard had been professionally landscaped. She'd rented actual china and crystal glasses because our regular dishes weren't impressive enough. Dad had even hired a photographer to capture candid moments of their success. The whole thing was costing them a fortune, money they'd happily spend on appearances while telling me I needed to earn basic privileges like communication devices. But what really made this party perfect for my purposes was the timing. Emma would be away at cheerleading camp, so she wouldn't be there to witness the fallout or steal focus as the family's golden child. It would just be me, them, and 60 of the most important people in their social world. I started preparing immediately, but carefully. Nothing dramatic that would tip them off. I maintained my usual routine of work, chores, and keeping my head down. I even volunteered to help with party preparations, which delighted Mom so much she actually complimented me to Mrs. Chen at the grocery store. "My oldest is being so helpful with the party planning," she bragged. Finally showing some maturity and family pride. If only she knew what I was really planning. The guest list was my starting point. Mom had left her notebook out one evening, and I memorized every name, every detail she'd recorded about dietary restrictions and social connections. I studied their routine, their expectations, the elaborate timeline they'd created for the perfect evening. Most importantly, I identified exactly what would humiliate them most, a public scene that exposed the reality behind their perfect family facade, timed for maximum witness impact. 3 weeks until the party. 3 weeks to finalize every detail of their social destruction. They'd taught me about consequences, after all. Now it was time for them to learn. The hardest part about planning revenge while living under the same roof as your targets is maintaining the performance of being their obedient daughter. Every fake smile, every, yes, Mom, and, of course, Dad, felt like swallowing glass, but I couldn't afford to slip up now. 2.5 weeks before the party, my careful act almost crumbled when I came home from my shift at Mickey's to find them going through my room again. Not searching, destroying. My mattress was pulled off the bed frame, drawers emptied onto the floor, even my small collection of books scattered everywhere. "What's going on?" I asked, though I'd learned to keep my voice level during these episodes. Dad looked up from where he was examining my work uniform pockets. "Emma called from camp. Said she was worried you might be hiding another phone since you seemed too happy during your last conversation with her." My stomach dropped. Sweet, innocent Emma, throwing me under the bus from 200 miles away because I'd made the mistake of actually sounding cheerful when she called to complain about her camp roommate. "I'm not hiding anything," I said, which was technically true. I'd learned my lesson about keeping contraband in my room. "We'll be the judge of that," Mom snapped, pulling my winter coats out of the closet to check the pockets. "And this attitude needs to stop. Just because you've been helpful with party planning doesn't mean you've earned the right to be secretive." They found nothing, obviously, but they made me clean up the mess while they watched. The whole time, Mom kept making comments about how suspicious it was that I'd been in such a good mood lately, like happiness itself was evidence of wrongdoing. That night, lying on my hastily reassembled bed, I realized how precarious my situation really was. If they suspected anything, even Emma's casual observation about my mood, they could easily ban me from the party entirely. Send me to stay with my aunt, or just lock me in my room for the duration. All my planning would be worthless if I wasn't there to execute it. I needed to be more careful. More convincing in my misery. The next morning, I started dropping subtle hints about how excited I was to help serve their important guests, how I hoped they'd be proud of me. I made myself smaller, quieter, more apologetic. When Mom criticized how I'd folded the rental linens, I actually teared up and asked if she wanted me to redo them. "That's more like it," she said, satisfied. I was worried all that responsibility with the party planning was going to your head. The performance was exhausting, but it worked. Within a few days, they'd relax back into treating me like their reliable servant, too beneath notice to be plotting anything significant. But the room search had revealed something terrifying. They were watching me more closely than I'd realized. Emma wasn't even here, and she was still reporting my behavior to them. Every move I made was being scrutinized for signs of defiance. I started wondering what else they'd noticed. Had I been too eager to volunteer for party setup? Too interested in the guest list details? The paranoia was eating at me, but I couldn't back down now. Not when I was so close to finally making them feel as powerless and humiliated as they'd made me feel for years. 1 week before the party, the catering company called to confirm the menu. Mom answered, but she was in the middle of her yoga routine, so she gestured frantically for me to take down the details. "Tell them everything looks perfect," she whispered, holding her downward dog pose. "Confirm the setup time and make sure they have our special instructions about the presentation." As I spoke with the catering coordinator, carefully repeating Mom's requirements, a terrible and beautiful idea began forming in my mind. The catering coordinator was incredibly helpful, walking me through every detail of the setup timeline. As she spoke, I grabbed one of Mom's planning notebooks and started jotting down information, pickup times, delivery schedules, contact numbers for the rental company handling the tables and linens. Now, your mother was very specific about the dietary restrictions, the coordinator continued. We have the vegetarian options for the Hendersons, gluten-free for Mr. Peterson from your husband's office, and that special dairy-free dessert selection for Mrs. Martinez. I wrote it all down, my hand moving automatically while my brain worked overtime. Mom had spent weeks researching every guest's preferences, dietary needs, and social connections. She'd called it the key to hosting perfection, knowing exactly how to cater to each person's needs so they'd leave raving about the party to everyone they knew. And the timing is crucial, the woman emphasized. We'll arrive at 4 p.m. sharp for setup, cocktail service begins at 6, dinner buffet opens at 7:30. Your mother stressed that everything needs to run like clockwork. After I hung up, I stared at the notebook filled with my careful handwriting. Delivery times, contact information, setup schedules, it was like holding the blueprint for my parents' perfect evening. And blueprints, I realized, could be modified. What did they say? Mom called from the living room, finally finishing her routine. Everything's confirmed, I replied, my voice steady despite my racing pulse. They'll be here at 4 p.m. for setup, just like you planned. She appeared in the doorway, slightly out of breath and glowing with that particular satisfaction she got when her plans came together flawlessly. Perfect. This is going to be our best party yet. Did you confirm the special dietary accommodations? All taken care of, I said, holding up the notebook. Every detail exactly as you wanted. The praise that followed felt like acid in my throat, but I smiled and nodded in all the right places. After she left to shower, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at those carefully written notes and feeling the weight of what I was considering. This wasn't just about embarrassing them anymore. What I was thinking about would be nuclear, the kind of thing that would destroy relationships, not just bruise egos. The kind of thing that could never be taken back. My phone rang, the house phone, since I still wasn't allowed my own device. It was my manager at Mickey's asking if I could cover an extra shift the day before the party. I'm really sorry, I told him, but I have to help my family with something important that weekend. No problem, kid. You've been working extra hours all summer anyway. Take the time you need. After I hung up, Mom appeared again, this time looking suspicious. Who was that? And why are you turning down work? You never turn down shifts. My stomach clenched. Another test, another moment where the wrong answer could unravel everything. It was Danny asking if I could cover for him tomorrow night, but I told him no because I wanted to focus on helping you get ready for the party. I thought you'd want me available for any last-minute preparations. The suspicion melted from her face, replaced by that same satisfied smile. That's very mature of you. I'm glad you're finally understanding how important this event is for our family. Our family. As if I was anything more than hired help in their perfect suburban production. That night, I lay awake thinking about the notebook full of information downstairs, about all the ways careful planning could go wrong, about how much my parents valued their reputation above everything else. They taught me that actions have consequences. They just never considered what the consequences of their own actions might be. By morning, my decision was made. I had 6 days to pull off the most important performance of my life. The next morning brought the first real complication to my carefully laid plans. I woke up to find Dad standing in my doorway at 6 a.m., fully dressed in his work clothes with a cup of coffee in hand. Get up, he said without preamble. You're coming to the office with me today. My blood turned to ice. What? Why? Your mother thinks you've been acting strange lately. Too helpful, too eager. He took a slow sip of his coffee, studying my reaction. She's worried you might be planning something to embarrass us at the party. So until Saturday, you're going to spend your days where I can keep an eye on you. I forced myself to look confused rather than panicked. Dad, I don't understand. I've been trying to help. And that's exactly what's suspicious. The daughter who can't follow a simple curfew suddenly wants to be helpful with our most important social event. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. We weren't born yesterday. 20 minutes later, I found myself trapped in the reception area of Dad's accounting firm, with strict instructions not to leave the building. He'd spoken quietly with the security guard, and I caught enough of their conversation to understand I was essentially under surveillance. Just keep her busy with filing or something, Dad told his assistant, Rebecca. She's going through a rebellious phase, and we can't trust her home alone right now. The humiliation was intentional and complete. Here I was, 17 years old, being babysat at my father's office like a problem child. Rebecca gave me sympathetic looks throughout the morning, but she had her orders. Every time I got up to use the bathroom, she'd casually mention it to Dad. When I asked if I could step outside for fresh air, she'd check with him first. By lunch, my carefully constructed timeline was falling apart. I'd planned to spend the week making subtle inquiries, gathering the final pieces of information I needed. Instead, I was trapped in corporate purgatory, alphabetizing client files from 1987. Your dad says you've been having some attitude problems at home, Rebecca mentioned during our lunch break. She seemed genuinely concerned, which somehow made it worse. He's worried about you. I wanted to scream that he wasn't worried about me, he was worried about his precious party. But Rebecca was just trying to be kind, so I nodded and mumbled something about going through a difficult time. The real panic set in when I overheard Dad on the phone with Mom around 3 p.m. She's been quiet all day. Compliant. Maybe too compliant, he was saying, his office door slightly ajar. I think we should consider sending her to stay with your sister until after the party. Just to be safe. Aunt Linda lived 4 hours away. If they shipped me off to her house, I'd miss everything. Months of planning, weeks of careful preparation, all worthless because I'd let my improved mood tip them off that something was different. I had to act fast. When Rebecca stepped away from her desk, I quietly approached Dad's office and knocked on the doorframe. He looked up from his paperwork, eyebrows raised. I wanted to apologize, I said, letting my voice crack slightly. I know I've been different lately. It's just, I really want you and Mom to be proud of me for once. I thought if I could help make the party perfect, maybe you'd see that I'm trying to change. Dad's expression softened marginally. Go on. But if you think I'm going to mess something up, maybe it would be better if I stayed with Aunt Linda. I don't want to ruin your big night. I let my shoulders slump in defeat. I just wish things could be different between us. The performance was risky, too obvious, and he'd see right through it. But I was desperate, and sometimes desperation breeds authenticity. Dad studied me for a long moment. Finally, he sighed. We'll discuss it with your mother tonight. If you can prove you're serious about being helpful and not causing problems, maybe we'll reconsider. As I returned to my filing, one thought echoed in my mind. I had less than 5 days to pull this off, and they were watching my every move. The game had just gotten infinitely more dangerous. That evening's family discussion felt more like a tribunal. I sat on the living room couch while my parents flanked me on either side, their matching expressions of suspicion making my skin crawl. Your father says you had an emotional moment at his office today, Mom began, her voice clinically detached. Very convenient timing, don't you think? I kept my eyes down, playing the part of the chastened daughter. I meant what I said. I really do want to help make the party special. Help how, exactly? Dad leaned forward. Because your idea of help and ours might be very different things. This was my opening, maybe my only chance to salvage the situation. I know you don't trust me around your friends anymore. Not after. I gestured vaguely, letting them fill in the blanks with whatever past embarrassment they wanted to remember. But I could stay in the kitchen, help coordinate with the caterers, make sure everything runs smoothly behind the scenes. You wouldn't have to worry about me interacting with guests. Mom and Dad exchanged one of their wordless spousal conversations, the kind that happened entirely through raised eyebrows and slight head tilts. The kitchen, Mom repeated slowly. You'd stay completely out of sight. Unless you needed something specific. I know how important this is to you both. I finally looked up, making sure they could see the sincerity I'd practiced in the bathroom mirror. I just want to be useful for once. What they didn't realize was that kitchen access was exactly what I needed. All the coordination between caterers, servers, and rental companies flowed through there. It was the nerve center of their entire operation. We'll try it, Dad said finally. But one step out of line, one moment of attitude or disruption, and you'll be in your room for the rest of the summer. Understood. Understood. Mom wasn't finished. And no phone. Obviously. And Rebecca will be checking in on you periodically during her shifts at the office this week to make sure you're where you're supposed to be. My heart sank. More surveillance, more restrictions on my movement. But at least I'd be home, with access to the house phone and Mom's planning materials. That's fair, I agreed. The next morning brought a new complication I hadn't anticipated. Emma called from cheerleading camp, and Mom put her on speakerphone during breakfast. How's party planning going? Emma's voice filled the kitchen. I'm so bummed I'm missing Dad's big celebration. Everything's coming together beautifully, Mom replied, shooting me a pointed look. Your sister is actually being helpful for once. Really? That's weird. She's usually so. Emma paused, and I could practically hear her choosing her words carefully. Well, you know how she gets about your parties. Remember last year when she accidentally spilled that tray of appetizers right in front of the Johnsons? My blood ran cold. That had been an actual accident. I tripped over the dog, but apparently Emma had interpreted it as intentional sabotage. And now she was helpfully reminding our parents to be suspicious of me. That was an accident, I said quietly. Sure it was, Emma laughed. Just like it was an accident when you wore that ratty old t-shirt to Dad's office barbecue instead of the dress Mom picked out. Another incident I'd forgotten about, now being weaponized against me from 200 miles away. Mom's expression was growing darker by the minute. Emma, sweetie, what exactly are you trying to tell us? Dad asked. I'm just saying, maybe keep an eye on her during the party. She gets weird when she feels left out, and you know how she's been about the phone thing. After we hung up, the silence in the kitchen was deafening. Kitchen duty only, Mom said finally, her voice sharp as glass. And if even one thing goes wrong, one single thing, I'll know exactly who to blame. The noose was tightening, but I was in too deep to back out now. The rest of the week crawled by like psychological torture. Every morning, Rebecca would arrive at exactly 9 a.m. to check in, which really meant making sure I hadn't burned the house down or escaped through a window. Mom had given her a key and explicit instructions to inspect whatever I was doing. Just tidying up for the party, I'd say cheerfully as Rebecca found me organizing the linen closet or polishing the good silverware. What she didn't see was me memorizing every detail of Mom's master planning binder, photographing pages with the old digital camera I'd found in a junk drawer, or carefully noting which vendors were calling when. The catering company called 3 more times with small clarifications. Each time, I volunteered to handle the call since Mom was usually in the middle of some other party preparation crisis. The woman on the phone, Jennifer, had started recognizing my voice. Oh, hi honey, it's you again. Your mom is so lucky to have such a helpful daughter. Now, about the setup timeline. What Jennifer didn't know was that I'd started taking additional notes during our conversations. Not just the information Mom needed, but everything, delivery truck routes, staff schedules, backup contact numbers, even which entrance they'd be using to bring equipment into the backyard. By Thursday, I had enough information to orchestrate a disaster that would make my parents' previous social embarrassments look like minor hiccups. The question was whether I'd actually have the nerve to follow through. That question got answered when I overheard Mom on the phone with Aunt Linda Thursday evening. I think we should have sent her away after all, Mom was saying, her voice carrying up the stairs to where I was supposedly organizing the hall closet. She's being too perfect. Too helpful. It doesn't feel genuine. Maybe she's actually trying to change. Aunt Linda's voice was faint through the phone speaker. You don't know her like I do. This is calculated. She's planning something, I can feel it. Mom's voice dropped lower, but I could still make out her words. James thinks I'm being paranoid, but a mother knows. There's something different about her this week. What are you going to do? After the party, we're sending her to that military-style boarding school in Tennessee. The one the Hendersons used for their oldest son. She needs structure we obviously can't provide. The blood drained from my face. Military boarding school. They were planning to ship me off to some disciplinary institution because I'd been too helpful with their stupid party. I sat there in the hallway, surrounded by perfectly organized winter coats, listening to my mother plan my exile. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because my attempt to be a good daughter felt suspicious to her. That's when I realized the truth I'd been avoiding. There was no winning with them. No amount of good behavior, no level of compliance, no gesture of helpfulness would ever be enough. I would always be the problem child who needed to be controlled, managed, or ultimately removed when I became too inconvenient. The boarding school research was apparently already done. Mom had brochures hidden in her desk drawer. I found them Friday morning when she stepped out to meet with the florist. Bright photos of uniformed teenagers marching in formation, testimonials from grateful parents about behavioral transformation, and a price tag that made my stomach turn. They were willing to spend $30,000 a year to make me someone else's problem, but couldn't let me have a phone I'd bought with my own money. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling, which sent Mom into a complete panic about the weather potentially ruining her outdoor party setup. She'd been checking her phone every 5 minutes since dawn, refreshing the weather app like it might change the forecast through sheer force of will. It's supposed to clear up by noon, Dad said for the 4th time, but his own voice carried an edge of worry. I made breakfast for everyone without being asked, playing my role as the reformed daughter right up until the end. I'm sure it'll be beautiful, I said, setting down Dad's coffee exactly how he liked it. You've planned everything so perfectly. In 6 hours, their guests would start arriving. In 6 hours, I'd either execute my plan or lose my nerve completely. But after hearing about the boarding school, my choice was already made. They wanted consequences for my behavior. They were about to learn what consequences really looked like. The rain stopped at exactly 11:47 a.m., and Mom took it as a sign from the universe that her party was destined for greatness. She actually clapped her hands together when the first ray of sunlight broke through the clouds. I told you it would clear up, she said, as if she'd personally negotiated with the weather gods. Quick, help me move the outdoor furniture back into position. For the next 2 hours, I was the perfect assistant. I arranged chairs, wiped down tables, and helped hang the string lights that would create the magical ambience Mom had been obsessing over. Every task completed flawlessly, every instruction followed to the letter. At 2 p.m., the rental truck arrived with the good china and crystal stemware. I helped carry everything inside, mentally cataloging where each piece went. The dining room became a staging area filled with boxes of elegant serving pieces that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Be extra careful with those, Mom warned as I unpacked wine glasses. They're on loan from the country club, and if even one breaks. I understand, I said, handling each glass like it was made of spun gold. What I didn't say was that I understood far more than she realized. At 3:30, Mom's stress levels reached a fever pitch when she realized the bathroom upstairs needed fresh flowers to match the ones being arranged downstairs. I can't believe I forgot about the powder room arrangement, she muttered, pacing frantically. Mrs. Henderson always notices details like that. She's going to think we're sloppy. I could run to the flower shop, I offered. I know exactly which ones you wanted. Mom stopped pacing and stared at me like I'd suggested robbing a bank. Absolutely not. You're not leaving this house today. Period. Then I'll call them and see if they can deliver something small, I said quickly. I had their number from when you placed the main order. This was my first test. If she let me make the call, it meant she was starting to trust my helpfulness. If she refused, it meant her paranoia was still stronger than her need for perfection. Mom chewed her lip, glancing at the clock. Fine. But put it on speaker so I can hear exactly what you're saying. Victory. I dialed the florist while Mom hovered over my shoulder and ordered a small arrangement of white roses and baby's breath for the upstairs bathroom. The entire conversation was perfectly innocent, exactly what a helpful daughter would do. What Mom didn't notice was me also grabbing the business card for the party rental company that was sitting on the counter. Or the way I memorized the direct line to the catering coordinator when she called again to confirm their arrival time. At 4 p.m. sharp, Jennifer and her catering team arrived in their pristine white van. Mom went into full hostess mode, greeting them like they were visiting royalty while I hung back and observed. Everything should be exactly as we discussed, Mom told Jennifer, walking her through the backyard setup. The cocktail station by the pool, the main buffet along the back fence, and the dessert table near the patio doors. I watched them unload warming trays, serving platters, and coolers full of carefully prepared food. Jennifer's team moved with practiced efficiency, transforming our backyard into something that belonged in a magazine spread. Your daughter's been so helpful with all our coordination calls, Jennifer mentioned to Mom while they arranged chafing dishes. You've raised a real responsible young lady. Mom's smile looked like it was carved from ice. Yes, she's been very involved in the planning. At 5 p.m., I excused myself to change into the outfit Mom had selected for me, a conservative navy dress that screamed, well-behaved daughter, and would help me blend into the background during the party. As I got dressed, I could hear the first guests arriving downstairs, their cheerful voices mixing with the sound of jazz music Dad had chosen for the evening. By 5:30, the house was full of people I'd been serving and cleaning up after for years. Through my bedroom window, I could see the backyard filling up with Dad's colleagues, Mom's various social groups, and neighbors who'd probably been planning their own competing parties for months. It was time. I took one last look around my room, at the bed where I'd cried myself to sleep after each destroyed phone, at the desk where I'd done homework by borrowing other people's devices, at the window I'd stared out of while listening to my parents plan my exile to military school. Then I headed downstairs to help serve the party that would be remembered for all the wrong reasons. The kitchen was a symphony of controlled chaos when I arrived downstairs. Jennifer's catering team had transformed it into a professional operation, with servers weaving between warming trays and ice-filled buckets of champagne. The air hummed with quiet efficiency and the clatter of serving utensils. There you are, Mom appeared at my elbow, her hostess smile firmly in place but her voice carrying that familiar edge of warning. Jennifer has everything under control, but I want you to stay close and help with anything they need. Perfect. I nodded dutifully and approached Jennifer, who was arranging canapes on silver platters with artistic precision. Your mom said you'd be helping coordinate things from back here, she said warmly. Honestly, after all our phone conversations this week, it feels like we're old friends. You really know your way around party logistics. From the corner of my eye, I saw Mom's expression flicker with something that might have been surprise or suspicion. She'd assumed all my helpfulness had been surface-level busy work, not realizing how much detail I'd actually absorbed about every aspect of tonight's event. I just want everything to be perfect for my parents, I said, loud enough for Mom to hear. This party means everything to them. Jennifer beamed. That's so sweet. You know, in 15 years of catering, you don't often see teenagers who actually care about their family events. Usually they're hiding in their rooms or complaining about having to dress up. Mom's smile became even more forced. Yes, well, she's been unusually helpful lately. The first real complication arrived at 6:15 p.m. in the form of Mrs. Henderson from down the street, who made a beeline for the kitchen despite it clearly being off-limits to guests. I just had to compliment whoever arranged those gorgeous appetizers, she gushed, completely ignoring the fact that she was interrupting a professional catering operation. And I wanted to peek at the dessert setup. Carol's been bragging about some special Italian pastries. Mom's panic was immediate and visible. Mrs. Henderson was exactly the type of guest who would notice and remember every flaw, then share her observations with the entire neighborhood. Having her wandering around the kitchen, potentially seeing behind-the-scenes chaos, was Mom's worst nightmare. Oh, you're so kind, Mom said, physically steering Mrs. Henderson back toward the living room. But let's keep the kitchen clear so the caterers can work their magic. I promise the desserts will be worth the wait. After they left, Jennifer shook her head with amusement. There's always one guest who thinks the kitchen is part of the tour, she said. Don't worry, we're used to it. But I could see the incident had rattled Mom. She kept glancing back toward the kitchen entrance, clearly torn between wanting to supervise every detail and needing to play hostess to her guests. Maybe I should station myself by the door, she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. Keep people from wandering back here. I can handle that, I offer quickly. If anyone comes looking for you, I'll redirect them back to the party. Mom studied my face for a long moment. In the background, I could hear Dad's booming laugh mixing with the conversations of his office colleagues, the sound of success and social triumph that meant everything to both my parents. Fine, she said finally. But remember, you're invisible tonight. Helpful but invisible. No interacting with guests unless it's absolutely necessary. As she returned to the party, Jennifer touched my arm gently. Your mom seems pretty stressed about tonight. It's really important to her, I said, which was probably the most honest thing I'd said all week. She's worked so hard to make everything perfect. What I didn't add was that in about 30 minutes, all that perfect planning was about to fall apart in the most spectacular way possible. The kitchen timer on the warming trays showed 6:47 p.m. Almost time to begin. The moment of truth came when Jennifer received a phone call at exactly 7:15 p.m. I watched her face change from professional calm to confused concern as she stepped away from the dessert station. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? She said into her phone, pressing one finger to her ear to block out the kitchen noise. No, we're already here. We've been here since 4 o'clock. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my expression neutral as I arranged napkins nearby, close enough to hear every word. What do you mean there's been a mix-up with the address? Jennifer's voice was getting higher. We're at 847 Maple Drive, exactly where we're supposed to be. Perfect. The call I'd been waiting for. Jennifer caught my attention and mouthed, 1 second, before stepping further away. But in a kitchen full of people, there was nowhere private to go. Her side of the conversation carried clearly over the ambient noise. No, sir, I understand you're upset, but we can't be in 2 places at once. Yes, I know your event starts at 7:30. No, we definitely don't have another team available tonight. One of the other catering staff, a young guy named Marcus, looked up from the champagne bottles he was arranging. Everything okay, Jen? Jennifer covered the phone with her hand, her face pale. There's some kind of scheduling conflict. Another client says we're supposed to be at their party right now. She returned to the call. Let me check our booking system. Can you hold on one moment? She pulled out a tablet and started scrolling frantically through what I assumed was their scheduling software. The longer she searched, the deeper her frown became. This is impossible, she muttered. We definitely confirmed this address multiple times this week. That's when she looked at me, and I saw the exact moment suspicion began to form in her eyes. Honey, she said carefully, you handled a lot of our confirmation calls this week, right? When your mom was busy with other party preparations? The kitchen suddenly felt smaller, like all the air had been sucked out of it. 3 catering staff members were now watching our conversation, and I could hear Dad's voice getting louder in the backyard as he launched into one of his favorite work stories for his colleagues. I just took messages, I said, proud of how steady my voice sounded. Mom always handled the important details herself. Jennifer's phone buzzed with what sounded like an incoming text. She glanced at it, and her face went completely white. Oh no. Oh, this is very, very bad. She looked around the kitchen like she was seeing it for the first time. The other client just sent a photo of their signed contract. The one with today's date and a 7:30 start time. Marcus set down the champagne bottle he'd been holding. Jen, what are you saying? I'm saying we might be double booked. And the other party? She checked her phone again, her hands visibly shaking. It's the mayor's retirement celebration. With 200 guests. And every food critic in the city. The kitchen went dead silent except for the sound of the jazz music drifting in from the backyard, where 60 of my parents' most important social connections were expecting a flawless dining experience in approximately 15 minutes. Jennifer looked at me again, and this time her expression was purely professional crisis management. Sweetheart, I need you to get your mother. Right now. We have a very serious problem. But before I could move, Mom's voice rang out from the doorway behind me. Is everything all right back here? Some of the guests are asking about when dinner service will begin. She stepped into the kitchen wearing her perfect hostess smile, completely unaware that her carefully orchestrated evening was about to implode in front of everyone who mattered to her. Jennifer turned to face her, still holding the phone, her professional composure cracking at the edges. Mrs. Patterson, we need to talk. The color drained from Mom's face as Jennifer explained the situation. I watched her perfect hostess mask crack in real time, her smile flickering like a broken neon sign. What do you mean double booked? Mom's voice was barely above a whisper, but I could hear the panic creeping in around the edges. We confirmed everything multiple times this week. Jennifer held up her phone, showing the text messages. I have a signed contract for the mayor's retirement party at the Riverside Country Club. Same date, same time. Apparently there was some kind of miscommunication with our booking system. The lie came so smoothly I almost believed it myself. Weeks of careful planning had led to this moment, using the catering company's online portal that I'd gained access to during one of our confirmation calls, creating just enough confusion in their scheduling system to manufacture this exact crisis. But you're here, Mom said desperately, gesturing around the kitchen at all the food and equipment. You're already set up. The other party can wait, right? Marcus cleared his throat uncomfortably. Ma'am, the other client is the mayor. And there are food critics attending. If we don't show up there. He trailed off, but the implication was clear. We could lose our business, Jennifer finished quietly. I'm so incredibly sorry, but we have to prioritize the larger event. The liability alone. I watched my mother's world collapse in slow motion. Through the kitchen window, I could see Dad gesturing enthusiastically to a group of his colleagues, completely unaware that his perfect evening was disintegrating 50 feet away. How long do we have? Mom asked, her voice hollow. Jennifer checked her watch. We need to start packing up immediately to make it to the country club by 8. I know this is a disaster, and will absolutely refund your deposit, but... The guests are expecting dinner in 10 minutes, Mom interrupted, her composure finally cracking completely. 60 people. My husband's promotion celebration. His entire office is here. The desperation in her voice was so raw it almost made me feel guilty. Almost. What about the food that's already prepared? I suggested helpfully. Couldn't you leave that behind? Jennifer shook her head. Everything needs to go to the other event. We prepared specific quantities based on their headcount. She paused, looking genuinely distressed. I can recommend some restaurants that might be able to do emergency catering, but on a Saturday night with no notice. Mom pulled out her phone with shaking hands. What restaurants? Give me names, numbers, anything. While Jennifer rattled off a list of places that would almost certainly be fully booked or unable to cater a party of this size on 2 hours' notice, I watched the catering team begin their efficient breakdown of everything they'd spent hours setting up. The warming trays disappeared first, followed by the carefully arranged serving platters. The elaborate dessert display that Mom had photographed for her social media was packed away like it had never existed. Mrs. Patterson, Marcus said gently as he wrapped the Italian pastries she'd bragged about to Mrs. Henderson, what do you want us to tell the guests about dinner service? Mom stared at him like he'd asked her to explain quantum physics. Through the chaos, Dad's voice grew louder in the backyard as he began what sounded like an impromptu toast to his promotion and the wonderful evening ahead. I don't know, she whispered, and for the first time in my life, I saw my mother look completely powerless. The catering truck would be pulling out of our driveway in 20 minutes, leaving behind a backyard full of hungry, important guests and 2 parents who just learned what real humiliation felt like. The sound of the catering truck's engine starting up was like a funeral bell tolling in our driveway. Through the kitchen window, I watched Jennifer's team load the last of their equipment while Mom stood frozen in the doorway, still clutching her phone full of useless restaurant numbers. Maybe we could order pizza. I suggested quietly, knowing how ridiculous it sounded even as the words left my mouth. Mom turned to look at me with an expression I'd never seen before, pure, undiluted panic mixed with something that might have been hatred. Pizza, she repeated, her voice flat. For 60 people. Including your father's boss and the entire senior staff of his firm. Before I could respond, Dad's booming voice carried in from the backyard, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time we moved inside for what my lovely wife promises will be an unforgettable dining experience. The sound of chairs scraping against the patio stones followed, along with the cheerful chatter of guests making their way toward the house. Mom's face went from pale to gray to something approaching green. They're coming inside, she whispered. They're all coming inside and there's no food. That's when Mrs. Henderson's voice cut through the approaching crowd. Carol, darling, something smells absolutely divine. I've been telling everyone about those Italian pastries you mentioned. Mom grabbed my arm so hard it hurt. You have to help me, she said, her perfectly manicured nails digging into my skin. Please. I know things have been difficult between us lately, but I need you to help me figure this out. For a split second, seeing her so desperate and broken, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost wanted to confess everything and help her salvage something from the wreckage. Then I remembered the boarding school brochures hidden in her desk drawer. What do you want me to do? I asked, pulling my arm free. The emergency restaurants Jennifer mentioned, start calling them. All of them. Offer double their normal rate, triple if you have to. And check if any of the grocery stores have pre-made party platters we could pick up. Dad appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face flushed with wine and social success. Carol, everyone's asking about dinner. When should we? He stopped mid-sentence, taking in Mom's panicked expression and the conspicuous absence of catering staff. Where is everyone? Where's the food? Mom opened her mouth, but no sound came out. It was like watching someone short-circuit in real time. There was a scheduling mix-up, I said quickly, stepping into the silence. The catering company had to leave for another event. We're working on backup options. Dad's expression went through several rapid changes, confusion, disbelief, and finally a growing horror as he processed what this meant for his perfect evening. A mix-up? What kind of mix-up? We confirmed everything this week. Through the doorway behind him, I could see guests beginning to mill around the dining room, looking increasingly puzzled by the empty tables where elaborate food displays should have been. Someone laughed, probably at one of Dad's earlier jokes, but it sounded hollow in the foodless house. James, we need to figure this out quickly, Mom said, finally finding her voice. Before people start asking too many questions. But it was already too late for that. Mister. Peterson from Dad's office had wandered into the kitchen, probably looking for a bathroom, and was staring at the empty warming stations with obvious confusion. "Everything all right back here?" he asked, his gaze moving from the vacant counters to my parents' stricken faces. "The wife sent me to ask about dinner service timing." Dad's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air while Mom frantically gestured at her phone as if the right restaurant might materialize through sheer willpower. That's when I realized the beautiful irony of the moment. For the first time in years, my parents actually needed me to save them. The question was whether I'd let them drown or throw them a lifeline. And honestly, I was still deciding. Mr. Peterson's question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. I could see the exact moment when his confusion shifted to concern, his eyes taking in the empty warming stations, the missing serving platters, and my parents' deer-in-headlights expressions. "We're just making some final preparations," Dad managed, his voice cracking slightly on the last word. But Mr. Peterson wasn't buying it. In the 15 seconds of awkward silence that followed, I heard Mrs. Henderson's voice from the dining room getting louder and more insistent. "Carol. Carol, dear, where did you disappear to? People are getting quite hungry out here." That's when my phone, the house phone, rang. Mom lunged for it like it might be her salvation, but I was closer. "Patterson residence," I answered, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling around me. "Hi, this is Tony from Romano's Italian Kitchen. Someone called about emergency catering for 60 people tonight." Mom's eyes lit up with desperate hope, and she practically wrestled the phone away from me. "Yes. Yes, that's us. How quickly can you get food to us?" I watched her face fall as she listened to Tony's response. Even from 3 feet away, I could hear him explaining that their kitchen was completely booked, they were short-staffed, and the earliest they could possibly deliver anything would be 10 p.m. 10 p.m. The party was supposed to be winding down by then. "What about just appetizers?" Mom pleaded. "Anything. We'll pay whatever you want." While she negotiated with increasing desperation, more guests began wandering toward the kitchen. Dad tried to intercept them, but our house wasn't designed for this kind of crowd control. The dining room connected directly to the kitchen, and people were naturally gravitating toward where they expected food service to be happening. "Maybe we should just tell people there's been a delay," I suggested quietly to Dad. "A delay?" His voice pitched higher than normal. "What kind of delay explains the complete absence of catering staff and food?" Before I could answer, Emma's cheerleading coach appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Patterson. I hope you don't mind me dropping by," Emma insisted I stop in on my way home from dropping the girls off at camp. My blood turned to ice. Coach Williams wasn't on the guest list. She wasn't supposed to be here at all. "Emma asked you to come here?" Dad asked weakly. "Oh yes, she was so excited about your promotion party. Said it was going to be the social event of the summer, and I simply had to see your wife's legendary party planning skills in action." She looked around the empty kitchen with obvious confusion. "Though I have to say, this is not quite what I expected." Mom hung up the phone with shaking hands. "Tony can't help us until tomorrow," she whispered, but in the dead silence of the kitchen, everyone heard her perfectly. Coach Williams's eyebrows shot up. "Is everything all right? You both look rather pale." That's when the kitchen door swung open again, and Mrs. Henderson herself marched in, followed by 2 other neighbor wives I recognized from Mom's book club. "Carol Patterson, what on earth is going on?" Mrs. Henderson announced. "Half your guests are asking about dinner, and the other half are wondering if they should just go home. The poor man from your husband's office has been standing by the empty buffet table for 10 minutes looking completely lost." The kitchen suddenly felt impossibly small with 7 adults crowded into it, all staring at my parents with varying degrees of confusion and growing suspicion. Mom looked around wildly, like she was searching for an escape route that didn't exist. "I think," she said slowly, "we might need to make an announcement to the guests." Dad's face went completely white. Through the doorway, the sound of 60 people waiting for answers grew louder by the second. The moment of reckoning arrived faster than I'd anticipated. Within minutes, word had spread through the party like wildfire. There was no food coming, the catering had disappeared, and the hosts were having some kind of breakdown in the kitchen. I watched from the sidelines as Dad attempted damage control, gathering everyone in the living room with a fake smile that fooled absolutely no one. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've had a small hiccup with our catering service tonight," he announced, his voice betraying none of his usual confidence. "We're working on resolving the situation, but in the meantime, please feel free to enjoy the open bar and—" "What kind of hiccup?" interrupted Mr. Johnson from down the street, the same neighbor whose party's mom had been trying to one-up for years. "Did they just leave?" The question everyone was thinking but hadn't dared ask hung in the air. I could see Mom shrinking into herself near the kitchen doorway, her perfect hostess persona completely shattered. "There was a scheduling conflict," I found myself saying, stepping forward slightly. "Unfortunately, they had to prioritize another event." Mrs. Henderson turned to look at me with sharp eyes. "And what event could possibly be more important than honoring your father's promotion?" "The mayor's retirement party," I replied smoothly. "With food critics attending. They couldn't risk their business reputation." The murmur that went through the crowd was immediate and uncomfortable. Everyone understood the implications. My parents had been deemed less important than a political event across town. Dad's boss, Mr. Chen, cleared his throat awkwardly. "Well, James, these things happen. Perhaps we should call it an early evening and let you folks sort this out." That's when I realized the true magnitude of what I'd accomplished. It wasn't just about ruining one party. I publicly demonstrated that my parents weren't as connected, as important, or as in control as they pretended to be. Their carefully constructed social image was crumbling in real time. "Wait," I said, surprising myself. "Actually, there might be a solution." Every head in the room turned toward me, including my parents' shocked faces. "Mickey's Diner, where I work, we've catered events before. Nothing this fancy, but—" I pulled out my phone. Yes, I bought another one that morning with money from my escape fund, and started dialing. "Let me see if they can help." For the next 20 minutes, I coordinated the most unconventional catering rescue in suburban history. Mickey's could provide burgers, fries, and milkshakes for 60 people, delivered in an hour. Not exactly Italian pastries and champagne service, but actual food. The guests, initially horrified by the casual suggestion, began warming to the novelty of it. Like a fancy picnic, someone said. How charmingly unexpected. As I hung up from confirming the order, Dad approached me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between gratitude and wariness. Why are you helping us? He asked quietly. After everything. I looked around the room at all these people who'd witnessed my parents' humiliation, then back at Mom, who was watching our conversation with desperate hope in her eyes. Because, I said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear, family helps family. Even when things get complicated. The party continued with Mickey's Diner burgers served on Mom's finest china, and somehow it became the most memorable event my parents had ever hosted. Not for the reasons they'd intended, but memorable nonetheless. Later, after the last guest left and we were cleaning up, Mom found me in the kitchen. The boarding school brochures, she said quietly. You knew about them. I nodded. Found them yesterday. She sat down heavily at the kitchen island, suddenly looking much older than her 45 years. We never knew how to handle you, she admitted. You were always so independent, so different from Emma. We thought strict rules would help, but they just made me more determined to escape, I finished. The conversation that followed wasn't a magical reconciliation, those don't happen overnight. But it was a start. An acknowledgement that their methods had been wrong, that I deserved basic respect and trust, and that maybe we could find a way forward that didn't involve military school or destroyed phones. 6 months later, I'm writing this from my dorm room at the State University, which I'm attending on a combination of scholarships, my saved diner money, and yes, some help from my parents. My phone, which I bought and paid for myself, sits safely on my desk, unsmashed and functional. Emma still calls me weekly to complain that I'm the favorite child now, which honestly might be the most satisfying revenge of all. Sometimes the best way to win the game is to flip the board entirely and start playing by different rules. My parents learned that lesson the hard way, but they did eventually learn it. And that's worth more than any destroyed phone ever cost me.